Can you listen to the sound? I mean, can you actually do a sound check with me?
Do you want? So I'm running a separate one.
Yeah, but I want to hear the house sound right now.
Okay. I'll let
Tell
I'll
him.
let them know.
Tell him.
Hi, Nobuko. Hi, Nobuko. You could speak into the mic anytime you like. All right.
Do you want to speak into your?
Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
No problem.
Hello.
It's okay.
I'm doing a sound check here, wanting to know if it sounds good and you can understand me. Who's here? Hello. 1, 2, 3, 4. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me? Hello?
Yes.
Hello, hello. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello? Sound check, sound check. Yay, 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 yay. Good. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello. Hello. 2 and 1, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hello, hello, hello.
Yeah, let's give her the hand.
Can I adjust your? I'm not sure about the house, but this one's separate. So
Just a reminder, if you have a cell phone, make sure it is off silent, vibrate, or on airport. Thank you.
Okay, we got to do wireless. I'm gonna need to re-mic you. Okay.
He needs to remic. Do you want me to use it stand up?
Yeah, we can give you this as well.
You want me
For
to?
the house.
You okay?
Test 1, 2, test 1, 2.
If only because now we got two different wireless microphones.
Test 1, 2, test 1, 2.
Don't worry about it. We could do this.
So you want me to just was this for the house?
Yeah.
All right.
Is that okay?
Hey, Genji.
Yes, I need to put it between my legs.
Just a reminder, if you have a cell phone, may you please make sure that it's on silent, vibrate, or off. Thank you.
And, yeah.
Okay.
All right. 1, 2, 3, 4.
58.
1, 2.
Can you scratch the mic?
1, 2, 3, 4. Is that better? Good.
Scratch, scratch.
Huh?
Okay,
Not
good.
very. Not very. But that's all they have. They were going to put that light on back there. They turned that light off back there.
they didn't want the screen.
Oh, no, this is better. It's better. It's fine. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. What are you going to do?
Can I readjust it again? This will be the last.
Hello. Welcome. We want to start, so if those of you in the back who would like to sit down, we'd appreciate you to sit down too, unless you want to stand through the whole thing. That's fine too. Okay, well, I want to welcome all of you here to the Buddhist Church. It's really very exciting for me to be here because I've known Nobuko Miyamoto, who's for...
Since dirt.
Since when? Dirt? Since way back, especially in the 70s with Chrissy Jima and she were here in New York, and I remember them. I think we had the United Asian Community Center, which everyone forgets about, but it was in Chelsea, and I remember the two of you came and actually sang "We Are the Children," and so it was so inspirational for me, I know, for all of us, because it really spoke to our spirit. So it was very important for me to remember that, and I wanted to tell everyone about that today. And so let me say a few words about Nobuko, which maybe many of you know already, but Nobuko Miyamoto is a songwriter, dance and theater artist, and artistic director of Great Leap. A child of Japanese-American relocation, early dance training led her to Broadway's Flower Drum Story and the film West Side Story. She found her own voice as an activist and troubadour in the New York Asian American movement, co-creating seminal album A Grain of Sand. Moving back to Los Angeles, she founded Great Leap in 1978 to produce works of the stage, music videos, new Obon songs, and the Obon. I have to say, I've been reading her, I've pretty much finished her book, and it's so exciting to read it because there's so much history in there. She covers so much ground, what she's been doing all these years. So I encourage you, if you haven't read it or you haven't, or even buy the book, we have copies here, so that would really be good for you all to do. All right, and then during the program, I would hope that you would all silence your phones. That would be much appreciated because we are filming today, so that would really be valuable if you would do that for us. Okay, thank you. And then, so she's a community artist and chronicled in 2021 in her memoir, this book, Not Your Butterfly. It's at the University of California Press. I don't need to go on to more of that, but it's back there if you want to buy it, you know. And we will have a reception upstairs as well. So, but now I turn this over to Cheryl Ikemiya, who's on the church board, New York Buddhist Church Board, who wants to say a few words too.
Yeah, I'm Cheryl Ikemiya. I'm on the New York Buddhist Church Board, and on behalf of the board and our chair, Gail Inaba, we welcome you. We haven't had a public event like this since before COVID, I think. So it's just wonderful to have so many people here from the community. The New York Buddhist Church was founded 85 years ago. And so we're celebrating our 85th anniversary this year. And as you saw when you came here, maybe you didn't see it because it's so dark, the statue of Shinran Shonin, who was the founder of Jodo Shinshu, is out front. And if you look on the plaque, there's a history of its coming to New York because it was originally 1 mile from the epicenter of the bombing in Hiroshima. And a lot of effort was taken to bring it here to New York as a symbol of peace. And so I know a lot of that is part of the history of the Japanese American community here as well. And so we do have a lot of activities here. Teddy is teaching the taiko to children and adults, and it's home to Sodaiko here. As well as we have a martial arts group and Tachibana dance. And we have a flower arrangement teacher who has started to teach on Saturdays here. But we have services here every Sunday, and we're teaching classes online, meditation and Dharma study classes. But we are so thrilled to have this community event, and Nobuko, who is such an illustrious figure in the Japanese American and the Asian American community. So thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Cheryl. My name is Rocky Chin, and on behalf of my colleagues, my sisters in the movement, Liz Young and Teddy Yoshikami, I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank the Buddhist Church. And this is a very special evening, so I want to thank you, Nobuko, for coming here in person. We really look forward to this. Tonight, it's our privilege to share some precious moments together with you in this room. And there has been such a demand that we have another event going on. Arlen Huang is in the room and is going to be doing another talkback with Nobuko, signing her book down in the Chinatown Lower East Side area. So you can catch that. I think both of them are sold out, actually. But we are really happy that there is a live stream tonight. So good evening to those of you who are on the Zoom. Nobuko is, in my opinion and many of our opinions, one of the most powerful voices in the early Asian American movement. And some of you might say, well, what is the Asian American movement? So I think Nobuko wanted me to give a little context to here. But tonight we also want to acknowledge the land upon which we gather, where the Lenni Lenape people lived in harmony with one another, in harmony for thousands of years. So we know tonight we're talking about the power of lyrics, and there's another lyric that some of us know by Woody Guthrie, which is, "This land is your land, this land is my land." And for the Lenape people, this land was, of course, held in trust for all living beings, and I think we need to take that to heart as we look forward to how we can move forward together. With the late Chris Ijima and later Charlie Chin, Nobuko was one of those who built the Asian American movement. Song by song, she was our own griot and troubadour, traveling the country, motivating dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of Asian Americans to become active in fighting for civil rights, reaffirming our own narratives, and re-examining our relationships with those underserved and oppressed peoples all over the world. With her voice, her lyrics, and the music, she gave us songs to sing. In thinking about tonight, I need to share that when I was going through college years, when we were younger, the nation and the world was a very turbulent time, and sometimes we forget. It's good to see a lot of white hair folks around here. I'm a little younger than Nobuko, but you know, a lot of the younger, we value our elders, right? We value our elders. And being, so by the time I graduated college, which was 1969, we already had 4 high-profile assassinations. The president's brother, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X. Just think about that. Very high visible, prominent leaders in the movement for justice. We've had many, many uprisings, the Watts Uprising in 65, Stonewall in 69. We experienced in 68 the My Lai massacre. Many of us Asian Americans saw on TV people who were massacred, and we started to wonder, why are we fighting this war in Vietnam? The war expanded to Cambodia in 1970. And I mention all of this because I want to give some context in which Nobuko writes her memoir and talks about her change, because she was really, in some sense, someone who would be on her way to Broadway, on the stage. And yet, of course, she talks about all the contradictions there in her memoir. And so many of us were students, and the student movement was very much a part of the Asian American movement. San Francisco State Strike in 68, huge anti-war demonstration in 69, campus uprising spread in 69, Kent State and Jackson State. Kent State, 4 students were killed, 9 wounded in Jackson State. Just 11 days later, in 1970, 2 killed and 12 wounded. So it's sobering to think about that time, but isn't it important to think about it now? Now when we really need songs for ourselves, songs to bring people together. So we want to thank the Buddhist Church of New York for being the first venue for Nobuko Miyamoto's in-person sharing tonight. We ask that you buy as many books as you can. We don't want to be carrying them back to Los Angeles. Buy them for your friends, for your children, for your loved ones. I have read the book several times, and page 133 talks about this church. Yes. So I really think this is a special place to start this conversation. So without further ado, Nobuko Miyamoto.
Thank you. Yes, it was in 1970, the summer of 1970. I don't know exactly the date. Can you hear me, everybody in the back? No? Let's get a little bit more volume. Yeah. No, too much. Okay. Better? Can you hear me now? So it was in the summer of 1970, and I need to bring Chris Ijima into the room, because if it wasn't for Chris, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. And I'm going to talk more about him, but this was the place we did our very first concert in the summer of 1970, which earned us just enough money to go to California and to do our first tour. And 2 people that were part of hearing that first.
Excuse me. There you go.
Oh, you don't want it in front of my face. Okay. 2 people that were here, and maybe there were other. Who was here that day? Anybody? Who was here that day? Arlen and Rocky? Laura? Yes. So I'm here. Yes, so we have. So afterwards, Rocky and Arlen, I heard this story, went outside afterwards, out of this church, and said, we got to do something about it. We want to share this music, and decided to do a project called A Yellow Pearl. And so I thank you for being there and here tonight in this historic moment for me. And so Chris is here with us. I grew up without a song that sang me. I didn't know I was missing my own song till I found my sisters and brothers rising, searching, claiming their silenced voices. I stood with them, I sang, I learned. We all have a song within us. Now, I see my song making a sacred task of deep listening, grasping a melody from an inner ether, weaving meaning from the madness we're living, and the final act, finally finding the courage to sing out loud, to touch even the single soul as only a song can do, to sing aloud, to birth a better world, knowing we all have a song within us. So I'm going to start at the beginning. When I wrote this book because an elder, Grace Lee Boggs, who I had visited when she was just turned 100, and when I left her house in Detroit, she said, "You've got to write your book. It'll change your life." It changed mine. And when Grace Lee Boggs tells you to do something, you do it. So I considered it an assignment like many of the things that I've done in my life, it doesn't really come from me. It comes because I'm asked of it. And so I'm going to start at the beginning because the story is long. And I'm not going to hit all of it, but I'll tell you that the first night I was here, which was Monday night, I couldn't sleep very well because although I've been here many times visiting since I left in 1973, I hadn't written a book about it. And so to come here with the book, knowing I was going to read, also just stirred up so many memories for me. So this is sort of an emotional moment for me as well. And thank you for sharing it with me. So this is the beginning. I was born in a place I didn't belong. At 2, I became the enemy, a would-be spy, a threat to U.S. internal security. Soon I was removed along with 128,000 others who looked like me and my family to a place grown-ups called camp. But it was no summer camp. So that was the beginning. At 2 years old, being a child of Japanese American relocation, removal to a concentration camp. And that experience was to be removed forcibly, to lose a sense of home, a sense of place. Today, people would call it a trauma. But in those days, that seemed like trauma was not in the art vocabulary. But as I look back on it, I realized how lost I was. And so I'm improvising a lot of this for you. I'm reading, but I'm improvising where I'm going with this. So, my father, when we went to Santa Anita Racetrack first, and we slept in the horse stalls. And after several months, they came around and asked the men in the camp if they would, one, volunteer for the army, which my father refused. He wouldn't fight for the country that would put us in camp. But they also asked if some men would volunteer to harvest sugar beets in Montana, and that if he could take my mother and me, he said he would do it. So we went to Montana, and from Montana, we went to my grandfather's little place in Idaho. And then from there, we moved to Ogden, Utah. So there was a lot of moving. I had no idea where I was most of the time. And but it was in Ogden, Utah, where my father finally got a job, trucking, because that's what he did before the war. And he worked for a company that had hired him before. So he had a job, and he felt like a man again. And the first thing he thought about doing was to take us to a concert of classical music. And that changed my life. Everything seemed gray to me before that, blurry and gray. But after that concert and seeing this beautiful orchestra making this dynamic music, it seemed like the world was in living color. I was in the world of music. I had never heard anything as beautiful, so painful, so powerful. I was sitting in my seat in the balcony, but that music made my soul dance. I came away a different child. Something that night touched me in ways I had no words for. It took me inside a world where I didn't need words, where I didn't feel lost. It connected me to something greater than myself. It also sparked in me a deep longing, drawing my body like a moth to the light, something I had to be a part of. I had to be part of this great, flowing, majestic, magical world of music. So my mother saw me dancing to my father's favorite records, and she got the idea of getting me into a dance class. And it was just a little, country dance school in Ogden, Utah. But when I danced with music, I didn't feel lost, alone, rootless, a wanderer. Dancing gave me a sense of place, a way to be in the world. It was a way to express my feelings. Dance was my first language, my first voice. So, embodiment is something that is now that I look back on it, was something that was starting to heal me. It was beginning to heal me as a child. I didn't have words to talk about the experiences that I had gone through, but now I had something internal that was what gave me a sense of power over my own body that I had nowhere else. And so I am, even today, looking back at this experience as it applies to so many things right now of decolonization of our bodies, our minds. I was Western trained, so the language that I learned was in Western dance, mainly ballet, after the war. In ballet, you can't lie, you can't fake, you can't balance unless you're centered, you can't do multiple turns unless you're plumb. There's a technique to building and holding a high extension. It takes energy, physical strength, willpower, mental concentration, determination, discipline, visual perception. It takes strength to appear soft and gentle. It takes rigor. Now, there's all kinds of rigor. Athletes have physical rigor to win. Students need mental rigor to learn. Yogis need spiritual rigor to reach nirvana. I think a good dancer needs all of these to be able to express emotions, physicalize ideas, and tell stories with their entire being. A lot of people think dancers don't have brains. And I grew up really thinking that I wasn't very smart, and I didn't have confidence in my mental self as I did in my physical self. And at that time, the first place I danced was in Boyle Heights, which was with a lot of Latino and Japanese Americans girls in this east side of Los Angeles, where there was a big Mexican community. And that place gave my mother, actually, a sense of home as well, because she could have other ladies. She sewed costumes, and she could design costumes. And my mother was a frustrated artist. She wanted to be a visual artist. My father would, in his first mind, want to be a musician. But this was something so out of their reach. So they put a lot of energy in me. And a lot of Niseis or second generations would not allow, they knew that it's crazy way to make a living. How do you make a living as a dancer? It's, even today, it's a pretty impossible thing. So, but somehow, my parents just allowed me to continue this journey. And one of the first speed bumps that I got into was when I got a scholarship at the American School of Dance. The director of the school said, in order for you to be a dancer, you have to be twice as good as everyone else. And I was like 12 years old or 13, and I knew it was unfair. But it sort of gave me the will to push harder. And Mr. Loring, the director, he also sort of took me under his wing and pushed me harder because he knew what I would need. So I was very lucky because I started working very young. The first job I ever had was in a film called The King and I. And I know The King and I hit here in, Laura, you were in The King and I in Broadway, and Eddie Kochiyama, Summerstock. And there were people from the Kochiyama family that were also put on the stage as the children in The King and I. I played in the ballet, The King and I, which is but then after the next job, I had a few jobs in the film business, and then I got a chance to come to Broadway in a show called Flower Drum Song, which was supposed to be this all-Asian cast, and it was like the big ta-da, that, hey, we have all Asians on the stage. And Rodgers and Hammerstein, of course, were the big deals, you know. And everybody wanted to be in a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical. They did The King and I also. They did South Pacific. So they sort of liked using Asian faces and forms to tell stories. And this one was actually written by a Chinese writer. No, I can't, I'm having a senior moment. Yes, so he was one of the first Chinese Americans to have a work put on the Broadway stage. So the music, you know, we've heard so many wonderful Rodgers and Hammerstein songs, but Chop Suey was not one of them. And this was one of my first wake-up moments. For most of the 2-hour show, we didn't have to look at the audience directly, and we don't see how they looked at us. But at this moment, singing chop suey, like this, we're looking straight at them, serving ourselves on a platter of a stage. In a flash, I saw it. We're chop suey. We're Chinese food for white people. Not too spicy, not too stinky, not too real. No lap cham, no hum yu, no 1,000-year-old eggs. Oh, no, thank you. They looked so satisfied, so happy with this familiar dish. Chop suey was not what real Chinese people eat. It was survival food invented by Chinese cooks to please the palate of the lo fan, the white devils, right? But at that moment, I didn't want to please them. I wanted to shake them up. I wanted to leap off that stage and shout, "This is me, lady. I'm not your chop suey. I'm a third-generation American-born Japanese American from LA. You put me in concentration camp, remember?" That's how I felt. So that was my first moment, like, wait a minute. Our bodies are being used to tell stories that aren't even about us. And I felt uncomfortable. I felt like, what, all this training, all this work, all this sweat that I put in for so many years. I was 18 at the time. I had been dancing since I was 7, seriously, training. And this is what our bodies were being used for. So, you know, it was a moment for me to, but then what choice did we have? If you wanted to eat, if you wanted to make a living as a dancer, you had to play the game. You had to go along with it. So in a way, we were complicit if we wanted to make a living. And but it just planted this little thing in my head that something was wrong here. Eventually, I did so at that point, I was like, let me cross the color line. I want so hard to cross the color line. And after Flower Drum Song, I decided not to go to London with everybody else and do it there. And I went back to LA, and it just so happens that they were producing the movie West Side Story. And because I had worked for Jerome Robbins in King and I, maybe he noticed me a little bit more, but there were thousands of dancers dancing, auditioning for West Side Story. And somehow I passed for Puerto Rican. And I did do, but then I thought, okay, now what after this? What's out there for me? And that's when I started singing. And I was singing, of course, The Look of Love. I'm singing pop songs. I was going to be a chanteuse. And, but it was a kind of training that opened my voice up, because I had always depended on my body. And now my very patient singing coach, Deanie Clark, had the patience of bringing my voice out, which was not easy. Anybody would walk in the room and I wouldn't want to sing. And so I had to really get over this fear of my voice. And so I did sing, and in Seattle I got a chance to sing in a nightclub and actually sing 6 days a week. 5 shows on the week, and doing 3 shows a night during the week, 2 shows a night on the week, and 3 shows a night on the weekend. I really built up sort of the muscle of getting out in front of people and singing. And that was 1967. And young people were coming into the nightclub, the Colony Club at that time. And a lot of them were, college students, and they were protesting the Vietnam War. And they asked me one night to go, and they were going to have a protest the next day. And I just couldn't do it. Even though I was worried that my brother Bob was going to get drafted, and I knew, and I was beginning to see the world around me, beyond the stage, beyond the set, that there was a real world out there. I didn't have the guts to just let it go. I still was a performer. But what happened is that I went back to LA, and I actually I met an Italian filmmaker, and he was making a film about the Black Panthers, and asked me, it was a docudrama, and he asked me, you want to help me make this film? So I stepped out of my role, my normal self, and I said, yes, I want to do this. So I went from this, performer, this show business person, and suddenly leapt into the world of Black Revolution. And we made this journey together, making this film with real Black Panthers in Los Angeles and real Black Panthers in New York. And one of the places that it brought me was to a church in East Harlem. They called it the Young Lord's Church. And they had taken over this church because they wanted to do a Breakfast for Children program. And the church kept refusing, so they took the church over. And this place was occupied. I mean, it was just filled with Black Puerto Rican people. Mothers, fathers, radicals, everybody was in that church. And so I was in that church. It was December of 1969. And just a lot of energy, crazy energy. And So I was in there. I was listening to Felipe Luciano, a last poet. If you remember him, he was doing a poem, and after the poem, a tap on my shoulder pulled me from the dance of words. I turned to see a petite, middle-aged woman who looked Japanese. What was she doing here? A pair of winged 1950s glasses straddled her nose, a bandana wrapped her hair, and a yellow number 2 pencil perched on her ear. She could have been one of my LA Nisei aunties, but there was something different about her. She wasn't as well fed, and her clothing proclaimed function, not fashion. She had leaflets tucked under her arm and a small notebook in her hand. Was she a reporter? Her face was open with surprise. Maybe she was wondering what I'm doing here, too. We're the only 2 yellow dots swimming in this roiling sea of color. That was when I first met Yuri Kochiyama. And if you've met, how many of you ever met Yuri Kochiyama? Yeah. So you know what it is when she starts grilling you about where are you from, what camp were you in, blah, blah, you know. And that was Yuri, you know. And so she was really the one at the end of our conversation who said, do you know any Asians here Asian Americans here in New York? And I said, you know, I worked here 10 years earlier, it was about almost 10 years earlier in Flower Drum Song, but I didn't know anybody who was an activist. And she said, I want you to come to this meeting of Asian Americans for Action. And before I go do that, I'm going to talk, and she also invited me to come to her house on 545 West 126th Street. Apartment 3B was not like any home I'd ever been to. It was no quiet retreat from busy New York life. It was a meeting house, a guest house. I can't read that well here, it's dark. A drop-in center, a family hostel where you might find Black and Puerto Rican comrades, acquaintances, and strangers from anywhere in the world passing through to eat, to rest their heads for a night or two, or something, or even sometimes for weeks. It was beyond comprehension how the Kochiyamas and their 6 children, plus guests, managed to live in that compact 4-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. Before long, apartment 3B became my second home. The apartment was a movement sanctuary, a place you went to touch the truth. I loved sitting at the altar of a kitchen table layered with leaflets for upcoming rallies and walls postered with images of political prisoners. Free the Panthers, free Rugel McGee, stop the war in Vietnam, Chimurenga, Attica. 3B was a place of possibilities and responsibilities. You had to pay attention to all the injustices in the world, but we weren't going to change them alone. 3B was a crossroads between folks in the Asian, Black, and Puerto Rican movements, and we had a lot more to learn from each other. Yuri set a high standard to be an activist. When she, as a Japanese-American mother of 6, walked into that East Harlem church to support breakfast for children for Puerto Rican children, she was saying we all could do that. We all could do something to make a better world. So that was my meeting, my first awakening, really. So I'm focusing a lot tonight on, New York and what happened here, because this is the place more than any other that made me who I am today. And so I'm going to go into some spaces with you, if you'll let me take you there, that I haven't really done with this book before, because I don't think a lot of people would understand it. And so, but you're here and you live here, and many of you have lived this story with me. So, but let's go to AAA first. I honestly, I'm having trouble. The light is not bright enough for me. I wish I had a little lamp that I could see a little bit better. I don't know if you have anything in the church that I could see a little bit better. Like just a regular lamp, you know? It's just hard to see. Anyway, I'll keep working on this. So it's my brother, Bob Miyamoto, who really was a partner with me in a lot of ways in, I don't know if I can, but that's going to ruin your shot too, isn't it? Well, what? You want to just do it this way? Put it like this? Yeah, just put it like this. Can you just put it like this? Yeah, yeah. That's better. Just, can you stand it up like that? Yeah. Okay, that's much better. Thank you. Old eyes. I need light. So we walked into this meeting of the Asian Americans for Action, me and my brother, and downtown in the garment district, the office. And something about Asian Americans for Action, AAA, blew me away. The chairs were filled not only with young Asians, but also with elders, like my parents. They were actively participating and even leading political discussions. Some were family members, like Yuri and Bill Kochiyama, and their kids, Eddie and Aichi. Kazu and Tak, Ijima and their son, Chris. Minnie Matsuda and her son, Carl. I could not imagine sitting in a political meeting with my parents. All Nisei suffered from racial hostility and relocation. My parents were alarmed by our sudden turn towards political activism, afraid of us rocking their fragile boat, while the Ijimas and Kochiyamas had found a way of confronting their oppression through activism and engaging with their kids in the process. That was just mind-blowing for us. And so it didn't take long for me and Bob to get in the groove. New people were flowing in all the time, and I was politically green next to the AAA folks. I'd put nearly 20 years into my training and career in showbiz. The Black Panther film was my conversion, my first awakening in this bigger reality. I was coming from a totally different path than most of them, but I was able to drop all my baggage, pick up some leaflets, and dive into the work of being a community organizer. I was living an experience I missed as a child. I didn't have to be twice as good to prove I was equal. I didn't have to strive to make it. For the first time, I wasn't an outsider, a minority, the other. For the first time, I felt accepted just for being me, enjoying being with my brothers and sisters. I admired Chris Ijima, who was a super smart person. He was part of SDS and Students for Democratic Society, a graduate of Columbia University, a radical and mostly, he was a radical. Besides AAA, he was a member of Iwar Kyun, a political group fashioned after Chinese Red Guard and the Panthers, transplanted to New York's Chinatown. That's a lot of politics for a 20-year-old. With young Japanese Americans few and far between in New York, I think Chris found his comfort zone with this group of Asian peers in AAA. Though he was politically astute and sometimes a little dogmatic, he mostly showed his light side. He was funny and darn sentimental when it came to hanging with his homies. My brothers and sisters didn't just do politics. We loved to party and eat together, especially after meetings. In Chinatown, you could get a rice plate with chicken or beef and bok choy for $1.25 in those days. And that's a lot. And that's a lot of wrapping around about culture took place over those tables of that steamy cafe. Stuff like being an FOB and unable to read the menu, or juk kok, head full, meant foreign born and being able to speak Chinese, therefore smart, and juk sing, empty head, meant unable to speak Chinese. That was me, juk sing. So I was, I really didn't, I was not steeped in my culture. But it didn't matter. We were Japanese Americans. We were Asian Americans. And this was the beginning of our awakening. And what I was talking to Liz about was that we're lucky that we had a chance to heal and examine what had happened to us in the past as Asian Americans and do our therapy together. And it was sort of like having therapy, but it was in a very grand way, because it was not just talking, it was taking action. and that's what was making it so exciting and an amazing experience. So I didn't know that Chris played the guitar or sang. I never heard him sing. And he didn't know that I sang. And what happened is that one day, Warren Furatani, who was a political leader in Los Angeles, came to AAA and proposed that we come to Chicago to meet Asian Americans, radicals from the West Coast, organizers, people who were working in communities from the West Coast, and come, all of us, to Chicago to the Japanese American Citizens League convention and get them to make a stand against the Vietnam War. So we went to Chicago and it was an amazing experience. I've got to watch time. I'm going. And what happened is that in Chicago, not only were our minds blown by meeting young Asian Americans, mostly young, who were activists in the Japanese communities in the West Coast, which had much bigger space, much more numbers in community, to hear what they were doing in the communities, to see the magazines that they were creating and newspapers that were creating. It was like, wow, there's a lot of energy coming out of the West Coast. The East Coast also had, but it was a different kind of energy. It was more intellectual. And we didn't have the kind of huge, broad communities that they had on the West Coast. So we felt like it was really a different flavor that we were working with. So one night, what happened is, I'm not going to read this. One day we went to visit the Panthers in Chicago, and Fred Hampton had just been murdered by the police in Chicago, and the young Panthers who were left in that office were still serving breakfast for children after this huge attack against their office and the death of where they murdered Fred Hampton. And they greeted us like brothers and sisters, you know. They understood what we had gone through, going to camp, etc. And so we had that experience with them. Then we walked. We were going to walk back to the church where the floor. We were sleeping on the floor of the church, and we met Native Americans, and they had pitched a huge tent in front of Wrigley Field, and they were protesting for better housing for Native people who lived in urban Native people. And they brought us into a circle right there in front of Wrigley Field. And suddenly we found ourselves in a circle, and they did ceremony with us. They recognized us as brothers and sisters, and they brought out a pipe, and they passed the pipe around. And they told us the story. There would be 5,000 years of evil followed by 5,000 years of good, and that change would come when warriors, all the colors of the rainbow, would come together. And we were in sacred time at that moment. It was beyond reality. And we rose up and we kept walking. And we walked, and they were through this German neighborhood, and they were throwing cans at us and jeering us, calling us Japs and Chinks, and we just kept marching, and we got to the church, but the whole experience was so powerful, meeting with the Panthers, meeting with Native people. And after dinner, Chris brought out his guitar, and let's see if I can find this. I can't find this place. But anyway, he brought his guitar, and he started just noodling around. And I was like, oh, wow. And then he got into a groove. And then right there before us, he just started riffing on a song. And then I found myself to join in with him, even though he didn't know I sang. And it was really easy to sing with him. He was very soulful, and our voices just fit in together. And so so we just wrote the song like right on the spot. And Warren Ferdani heard it and said, "You got to sing this tomorrow for the big gathering." And we sang the song, which was really based on Fred Hampton's phrase, which the people's beat, because he always talked about the people's beat. And that's what we were feeling at that moment in that space, the sense of energy of the people moving, that coming together from the East and West Coast. You know, we weren't just a bunch of Asians in New York City doing this. This was happening all over the country. And organizing, awakening, seeing ourselves as part of not just an Asian world, an Asian American world, a minority, but seeing our struggle immediately connected to the Black struggle, immediately connected to Native peoples. So that was like for me the beginning of seeing solidarity, what they call solidarity now. So we sang a song called "A People's Beat" at that convention, and afterwards we realized, oh my God, there's power in this music. And we went back, and a terrible thing happened while we were there. A young sister, Evelyn Okubo, was in her hotel room at the Palmer House, and somebody slit her throat. Somebody got in her hotel room and slit her throat. And another young woman her roommate went upstairs and found her, and she also got her throat slit. Evelyn died, and so, of course, at the convention, it was just a big upheaval. And we went back home thinking we've got to go to Stockton, California, where this young girl was murdered, because we wanted to see what was going on there. We wanted to do a benefit. So we came back to New York. And in my apartment at 52 West 91st Street, we wrote, "We are the children of the migrant worker. We are the offspring of the concentration camp, sons and daughters of the railroad builder who leave their stamp on America. We are the children of the Chinese waiter. We're born and raised in the laundry rooms. We are the offspring of the Japanese gardener who leave their stamp on America. Sing a song for ourselves. What have we got to lose? We've got to sing a song for ourselves. Oh, we've got the right to choose. We've got the right to choose. So that was one of the first songs we intentionally wrote together. We wrote a few more, A Grain of Sand. I can't remember. Anyway, we wrote a few more. We had about 5 songs. And we learned some Dylan songs and some Beatles songs, and we had enough for a set. And where did we sing? Our first set of music was right here in this temple. It didn't look like this, but here we were, and that's why this space and being in New York is so important. It just shifted everything. I saw what music could do in the world, what a song could do. A simple song, 2 voices and 1 guitar. We went all around, up and down the coast of California, singing in Sacramento, Modesto, San Francisco, Oakland, Los Angeles, all kind of young people, elders. I mean, we sang in prisons, and we just saw the power of song, the power of how an idea, maybe with this emotional engine of music, could do to gather people, to get them to think a little bit differently, to actually feel connected. So our performances became very lively, and usually at the end people danced in a big circle, and my brother actually got up in California and started to do the tango bushi to the last song, which was usually the People's Beat. And that's how this idea of how dance and music also was a way of gathering people in a very special way. I don't know where I am right now, but so New York was this place that it happened for me. And in my neighborhood, not only, we were going to Chinatown and meeting down there, but also there were a lot of Asians on the Upper West Side. We had no place to meet. So where did we meet? 52 West 91st Street. Every Friday night, we had like 50 people coming to our house and crawling out of the windows practically, and it was getting pretty heavy there. So we needed a space. We really needed a drop-in center, something on the Upper West Side that we could gather. And so my brother and I started noticing that there was something going on in the community where people were taking over empty buildings for poor people. There was urban renewal was going on, and a lot of buildings were sitting there empty because they moved Black and Puerto Ricans out. Dominicans, a lot of Dominicans were living in the neighborhood. And, but they decided they were going to fight back. And a group called El Comité started organizing with them, and they started a squatters movement. So me and my brother and Chris went up to their office and asked them, hey, do you think you could help us to get a place to meet here, a drop-in center for Asian Americans? And the Upper said, oh yeah, you know. They took us around the neighborhood like real estate people. Yeah, you know, bodega on the corner, subway down the block, 88th in Amsterdam, perfect for you guys. So they helped us in the middle of the night take over a space. And we all thought, oh God, we're gonna get arrested. But somehow, we got into this building, cleaned it up a bit that first night, and sat there thinking we were going to get busted, and nobody came. So before long, we had a telephone. My brother made a really nice front, and then we were thinking, okay, what can we name this place? So finally, we came up with a name: Chickens Come Home to Roost, because we knew what Malcolm had said: chickens come home to roost, and we wanted to be strong and revolutionary. But then El Comité would call us up and say, hey, can the chickens come and sing for us to take over this building? Hey, can the chickens come? We became known in the neighborhood as El Pollo. So one day Chris comes home and he says, comes in my house and he says, we got to do this song in Spanish. I'm going like, oh yeah? Well, so my roommate was Aida Quascud, and she was Puerto Rican. She was part of the Young Lords Party, and she helped us translate the song into Spanish. And we had a coffee house in our neighborhood. This young man, Jim, I can't remember his last name, black brother, he and my brother took over this building on 91st and Columbus. And they fixed it up. They had those spools, and they made tables, and they painted the tables different colors, and they called this place the Dot. Do you remember the Dot, the coffee house? Anyway, so we would hear all these singers and performers from Puerto Rico, Cuba, from Latin America would come and perform there, and we were like really into their music. So this is the song. Nosotros somos asiáticos y nos gusta cantar para la gente. Hablamos la misma lengua porque luchamos por las mismas cosas. La lengua de libertad, líricos de amor, canciones de la lucha, la música del pueblo. Oh, oh, oh. So after that, we became very popular in that community. Everybody knew who El Pollo was. And we did more, that year, and the next year, we did more gigs, believe it or not, for the Puerto Rican community than we did for the Asian community. And we actually sang this song in Madison Square Garden for Puerto Rican Liberation Day. So we became, and the thing is that this music was a way to just enter people's hearts. So Yuri's always watching. Yuri's always wondering how to use things that she had around her. So Yuri got this idea. She took us to this meeting of Republic of New Africa with Matula Shakur and Attila Ayubi. We met at the hospital. Anyway, they were going to be doing a big rally in front of the United Nations. And Yuri thought that they should have an Asian American contingent. So we talked about it, and she asked us to sing for, and this was the first. Yuri, I have to say that Yuri was deeply respected by the Black community, and she was a citizen of the Republic of New Africa. They didn't call themselves in this organization members. They were citizens. They considered her a citizen of the Republic of New Africa. She and Matulu worked together on many issues. She went down south to Mississippi, working on all kinds of issues, including political prisoners. And anyway, she knew that this was a way for us for Black people to look at Asians differently. So when we sang, we only sang one song in that rally, and Matula set it up for us, and we sang, "We Are the Children." And at first they looked at us, all these Black radicals and activists, and looking at us like politely, and then by the time we got to, "We are the children," no, I said, the last two, "We are the cousins of the freedom fighter, brothers and sisters all around the world. We are a part of the third world people who will leave our stamp on America. We leave our stamp on America. Yes, we leave our stamp on America, America." And there we were, looking at the United Nations, we felt like the world was going to hear us. And suddenly, these Black activists looked at us as brothers and sisters, and Yuri had made her point, She knew that, and so after that, we started doing a lot of other things across. So not only were we working with Black Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, now we were also working with Black community. And music was an important part of sort of our introduction to that, that opened the door to that. And I don't talk about this, and I rarely read about it, but so one of the people in Republic of New Africa, Atala Ayubi, became the father of my son. And so that was a blood connection between our movements. Kamau was born in Los Angeles because I felt like I could do it better in Los Angeles by myself, or I just needed control over my life. So I went back to Los Angeles to have the baby, and 10 weeks after, and he was supposed to come out for the birth. He couldn't come out. There was a lot of issues going on in New York City, and 10 weeks after Gamal was born, Attila was killed. He was working to help build a mosque in Harlem for Malcolm X. He was very close with Malcolm X. And of course, Malcolm had died at 65. And so that mosque actually did finally get built. And yesterday, I was at the gathering, the 58th commemoration of the assassination of Malcolm X at the Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz Memorial and Education Center yesterday, which the Audubon Ballroom where he was assassinated became transformed into this wonderful, light, beautiful place called the Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz Center. And so the Shabazz family was there. I was with my sister-in-law, the sister of Attila, she was with me, who also knew Malcolm, and Akemi Kochiyama was there, and Angela Davis spoke as one of the speakers, one of the great speakers. And so it just brought everything full circle for me to be there and to meet the imam of the mosque that Attila died to have built. So my life has gone in a lot of different directions, and it all really came from living here and being part of the movement here. It was, Yuri and all of you that were part of this, that we were in this journey together that changed all of our lives in that moment in those 70s, in the early 70s, when we awoke and decided we were going to change the world. It's 7:16 right now. I just wanted to close with this thing about Obon, because I went back to Los Angeles in '73, and I landed at Senshin Buddhist Temple, and with a Reverend Kodani, who happened to love the arts, and invited me to rehearse and teach there in the social hall. And it's become my home, my spiritual home, as well as my work home for Great Leap, my organization. And after I was there for about 10 years and creating work about the stories of Asian Americans and putting it on the stage, Reverend Moss asked me to write an Obon song. Now, I told him I don't know anything about Japanese music, but he insisted, and it's like Grace Lee Boggs. When he asks you to do something, you do it, and you don't know what you're doing. I said, I don't know anything about Obon music, and he just hands me this cassette tapes. Listen. I said, okay, I'll do it. But writing an Obon song as a contemporary writer was a challenge. How do you make, and he wanted it in English. He wanted it in English so Japanese Americans like myself, who don't speak Japanese, would know, why do we dance in a circle? Why are we dancing like this? And Obon is the one time that, you may not speak Japanese, you may not know how to cook Japanese food, but during Obon, you will put on a yukata and you will dance in that circle. And there's something that happens in that circle. And for me, it became so apparent, and I experienced it after I wrote this, and I'm going to end with this. This song that started, sunset, sky turning indigo, moon and stars begin their evening dance, circle in the sky. Voice of wind, rhythm of trees, you can feel it if you dance, just dance. A cosmic circle danced around me. The sleeves of women and young children waved in the evening breeze. Brave men wearing yukata kicked up their geta. Teens in their hapikotes kicked up their tennis shoes. Elders danced with babies in arms. 1,000 souls moving, carefree, smiling, dancing. Yuiyo, just dance. Watching this cosmic dance, tears of wonder and gratitude rose in me. I let go and sang into the indigo sky. We were all connected, those in the circle and those gone before us. We were all moving as one. So I'm going to end there because it's 7:20, and Obon has taken me many places. Now I do Obon with the Latino community who does fandango, another form of circle music and dance tradition. We also do it with African people who do West African dance and Muslim Sufi in this project called Fandango Bon, which we bring people from many, many cultures together. So that moment here in New York, where I learned how to cross borders with so many communities to make music, has grown and grown and grown in so many different ways in these 50 years since that moment. And so I thank you for coming here and listening to me. And I couldn't tell you the whole thing, but if you want to go buy a book back there, we've got 25 of them. And we're going to have a Q&A here right now. So if you have, or you want to.
Thank you. Nobuko Miyamoto. Do you want to take a few questions? Nobuko came up here from Washington, D.C., and I had a chance to go down there because I said, I can't miss it. The Smithsonian invited her and a few members of her group, her musical group.
And Derek.
And Derek,
here.
back there somewhere. The Smithsonian is also celebrating the 50th anniversary of Grain of Sand, the album. That is the first Asian American album. Historically, it is a very special album, and it is. And Nobuko called me in the middle of the night or something with an epiphany that maybe we should do a new cut. I don't know how much we want to share, but she is working on that, and I think it'd be wonderful. The other thing is, of course, the Smithsonian is somewhat belatedly acknowledging that Asian Pacific Americans should be part of the huge American institution there. And it is our hope that someday, you know, we will have our rightful place within not only the Smithsonian, but, you know, Washington, D.C. and so forth. But I mention this because we were able to use the space in the museum as a place to get up and move. And unfortunately, I don't know if we can do that here, but,
Yeah.
The movement that comes from Oban and then the Fandango, Nobuko does with her Great Leap partnership with Quetzal and Marta Gonzalez in Los Angeles. I don't know how many people here have been there, but I've had the opportunity and privilege to dance. I'm terrible at Oban, but but that's, you know, that's something that was very special, not only there, but also here when we used to do it, you know, regularly. That is something that is missing, I think, in New York, I would say. It's not just the Japanese American community that comes out in Little Tokyo, but it's the Latino community and the Black community. And I happen to be a member of the Human Rights Commission for New York City. It's the civil rights agency, and I'm thinking, we need to bring that to New York City.
Yeah, let's do it.
We need to bring something like that to New York City, right? So I am mentioning that to the commissioner and to, you know, the powers that be. You know, it's you know, we need a few more Grace Lee Boggs to tell us what to do. But I think we all want to thank you for writing the memoir and for singing. And buy the book. She is going to take a few questions, but she will also sign your book. And you should give it to your friends. It is a wonderful memoir. You've only covered like first 20%, whatever, but
Yeah.
a very important part of that. And what I think is important is we all have our own narratives. We all have
Yes.
our own songs, and we don't have
Yes.
enough people who are doing that. All of you here can do your own song, and I think the Smithsonian and the Library of Congress and various museums, JANM, need our stories. And thank God you did it. I don't know how long it took.
Well, it took me 5 years, and I'm a songwriter, and it was a daunting thing at first. I thought, I mean, I've written short plays, I've written, but nothing like a book. But then what I did is I broke it down so that each chapter was like a song for me. And that was, after I saw 2 or 3 or 4 of them, then I said, oh, I can do this. It gave me the courage to be able to see I can just do, it's one chapter at a time. And one idea or one song at a time. And that's how it enabled me to do 80 years in this book. You have any questions that you want to?
So we'll take a few questions, and then we want everybody to buy the book and then go upstairs for a reception. And again, thank the Buddhist Church for this wonderful hospitality. Any questions or comments out there?
Laura.
I'm glad that you got a chance to see it, Kemi. That's right.
Okay.
And,
Stand up.
and also, no wonder why that you were emotional, because you were at, yesterday's at the 58th anniversary of Malcolm's assassination. So I'm glad that you saw Angela and Kemi.
Yes.
Just by chance, but maybe not by chance, because it's a major news story.
Oh, yeah, it was on the news today.
Well,
last night.
let's just put it this way, that we're re-examining history and re-examining the narratives, the conclusions or lack of conclusions, things like that. So I don't want to go more into it, but I'm glad you were here and were able to do that.
Well, I mean, at the time, like when Kamal's father was killed here, we didn't think about who killed him. I mean, there was supposed to be a shootout between 2 different Muslim factions. He went to a mosque, and then the shootout happened, and he was protecting his imam. But later, as the years went on, thinking about COINTELPRO, I don't think the U.S. government wanted a Malcolm X mosque to be here in Harlem. And so we'll never be able to know that, who really killed Kamal's father, but the thing is that many things happened in those days that were provoked by the government, and so.
Any questions? She will be there signing, so you could certainly, yes, back there. Just stand up and maybe introduce yourself.
Wait, the what?
How did you get to be on the Donahue show?
Oh, the Mike Douglas show.
Mike Douglas.
I was almost going to read about it in here. Actually, Yoko Ono actually called me out of the blue. I don't know how she got my number, and she. You can read about it in the book. She called, and most people who saw the show saw one version of what happened. But what happened was we went. Do we have time to? Anyway, we went. We decided we would appear on the Mike Douglas show. We thought it might be a good idea for people to see 2 Asian Americans singers who were singing their own song. And when we got to the station, we drove in the limousine with John and Yoko Ono to Philadelphia to the television station, and we were late. We get in there, they put us up there, rehearse the song, and we start singing "We Are the Children," and we get to "Foster children of the Pepsi generation, cowboys and Indians ride, red men ride, watching war movies with the next door neighbor, secretly rooting for the other side," and they stopped us and said, "What else do you have to sing?" And looked at Chris and we looked at each other and said, well, how many songs do we get to sing? And they said 1. And we said, we're singing this one. We had decided that in the limousine, in the back of the limousine where we were sitting. And they said, well, you know, there's some lyrics in here that the housewives of the Midwest might think are subversive. They had Bobby Seale on the show. Jerry Rubin was on the show. They're worried about us being subversive. And so, and they were just kept pushing and pushing. And then John Lennon came up. And John Lennon says, well, can't you just fudge the words a bit? And I'm thinking, John Lennon? Would he change strawberry to raspberry because somebody asked him to? And then the director again was pressuring me, and suddenly I just lost it. I don't know what, I turned red, and then I pointed at this director and I said, you put us in concentration camps and you're saying we can't sing this song? And I started walking out. And then Chris was like, what happened? It's like, she loses her mind. And I'm just walking towards the door, and I hit the door. I don't know where I was going, and then the director comes and, no. You can sing whatever you want. Then I thought, the finger has power. No, but I was totally lost it, and then they were very apologetic, and then blah, blah, blah. We go, and finally we do get to sing the song on, and if you see the tape afterwards, John Lennon and Mike Douglas come up to us afterwards, and they say, oh, that was so clever, those lyrics, watching war movies with so clever. And I'm going like, oh my God. You know, we wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't have a fit. And that was sort of like, again, this is what you have to go through when you're dealing with the system. You know, they're not going to let you do what you want to do they don't want to hear it, especially now. You know, so you have to fight for your voice. That's what I learned, and I didn't really. I don't lose my temper like that. That doesn't happen to me. It just happened really spontaneously without me thinking about it. And but it wasn't just that moment. It was 100 years of suppression. That's what was coming out. It was how many times have they done this to people, to our people, you know, to us. So that's where that came from. Thank you for asking that question.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you for your film. I think we need to go upstairs, but I wanted to just encourage people, if you haven't heard the album,
Grain of Sand.
It is Grain of Sand. It's available. Some people still buy CDs.
Yeah, Smithsonian Folkways. You can download it or order it. It has a booklet in there. And you can also order my new album, 120,000 Stories, from Smithsonian Folkways as well.
So the 120,000 Stories was also a huge production that you did at the Getty.
Yes.
3 days, was it 3 days?
2 days.
2 days,
for a day
sold
of
out.
remembrance. Yeah.
2 days at the Getty.
And Derek Nakamoto, who's back there, was a producer of the album 120,000 Stories. So we've been doing a lot of work together and enjoyed going to the Smithsonian and actually doing some of it live. And doing, you know, for an 83-year-old person that I am, I'm grateful that I have these stories to share. And I'm so sorry that Chris isn't here to be able to, his great gift of songwriting.
He's here in spirit.
You know,
he's definitely here.
Yeah, he's definitely here and lives on in this music.
Let's thank Nobuko Miyamoto.